Hey, welcome back to the PK podcast with Eli Blevins and John Groves. We're so excited that you're here today. And we were discussing this week how there is an invisible pressure that follows most preachers' kids everywhere they go. You grow up in church, people know your name before they know you. And they know who your dad is, who your mom is. And because of that, they often think that they know who it is that you are supposed to be. But what people don't always realize is that being a PK often means growing up under, a microscope. And so what that means for most PKs is that your mistakes are public and your attitude is noticed and your behavior becomes a reflection of your parents' ministry. And sometimes the expectation is PK stands for perfect kid. And today we want to talk about the fact that it just doesn't. It does not stand for perfect kid. It stands for pastor's kid. And so we want to talk about something that PKs don't talk about enough. And that is mental health, pressure, the weight of expectations. Because behind the smiles, behind the serving, behind the front row attendance sitting, a lot of PKs are silently wrestling with anxiety and burnout and identity struggles and the feeling that they just can't measure up. So today, we're going to get real, and we're going to talk about how God actually invites us into something much healthier than perfection. Eli, when did you first realize that people expected you to act a certain way because you were a PK?
The day was September 17th, 1993, coming right out of the womb, and there it was from day one. No, it wasn't. It wasn't. I will say this.
You say that jokingly, but I have heard, I don't have an actual memory of this, but I've been told that the day that I was born, there was a fellowship ice cream social dinner at the church, and that before they drove home, they drove to the church to make an appearance because it was important that we do.
Here's what's so different. The day I was born, my dad and granddad went to a football game hours after I was born.
It's like, woo, all right, cool. We can still make the game.
If anyone wants to know why I am the way I am, it's because my granddad and my dad went to a football game about 12 hours after I was born.
It's in your blood.
So it's in my blood. So it may not be ministry related, but sports related, it has literally been since day one. So apparently it was a big game, So I have such an appreciation. I actually carry as a badge of honor that that's what they did, because now I get to feel like I have guilt-free sports watching time. Because what's my dad going to say? Hey, Eli, don't do this. Well, 12 hours after I'm at, poor mom's still in the hospital and you're at a football game. Actually, that's like a goal to live by for me, is to be at as many football games as I possibly can. But so for me, so I think I have a story. I remember this clear as day. I remember being in 9th grade, and I may have told this story before, and there was a family at our church, and they had someone in my school that went with me. One of their kids went to school with me. And we were at this after soccer party event that we had, a thing. The word party is going to have a negative connotation to it when I say it, but it really was not there's no alcohol. There's nothing like that there. We just got done playing our sports thing. And this person also happened to play sports, and their parents did not want them to go to this said party, probably because of the negative connotation, but I was there. And I remember this person going, well, this party's okay because Eli's there. And if his parents let him go to this, then why can't you? And I think that was the moment I remember going, people are looking at what we do for how they even raise their own kids and the standard that they live by morally even. And to me, I didn't think anything of it. I'm in 9th grade, but I remember this kid who told me this, well, tell my parents you were going to be there and that it's going to be fine because you're there. And I didn't realize at that point that the standard for which they were living was based off of me and my family because they were in our church. And so, again, it was innocent. Nothing was happening at we'll call it a get together. But that was probably the first time I realized 9th grade, this is different. And there's probably been other things in the past before, but that was the first time that I specifically remember it kind of being like, I can internalize what's happening here. I have to live differently, or I am different, or whatever it is. So that was my first experience jumping into the maybe the fishbowl. I'm glad Instagram wasn't really a thing then, where your whole life had to be on display. But yeah, what about you?
Wow. I think that it was similar but different. If it was a thing that I was going to, it was probably like, yeah, that's going to be lame because they don't go to any of the fun stuff. So if they're going, that tells us all the things that are not happening, and high on the list is fun. So I think
High on the list is fun. John is going to Bible debates and for his high school trips.
you joke, but I was on the Bible quiz team, bro. Like we traveled, man. We had Bible quiz meetups, and it was,
I had
man,
soccer parties and you had Bible quiz meetups.
we had Bible, bro. I remember the first time we had a Bible quiz like lock in just for the Bible quiz team. And it was loads of fun. Question mark? I don't know.
I'll have a question for all the PKs out there. Do you actually like the lock-ins that your youth group does, or do you just like that you feel like you have 12 hours to terrorize the people that your parents hired?
I gotta say, I liked the lock-ins in the early days when we were still playing hide and seek in the massive church buildings. So, youth director goes, here's what we should do. We should get a bunch of hormonal teenagers, get
Yep.
them in one building and turn off the lights and tell them that they can go
What could go
wherever they
wrong?
want until we find them. Bro,
What could go wrong?
I remember the day that type of lock-in ended when this one girl decided to climb up on top of the coat racks in the hallway, and they all came crashing down, and it was like, all right, we've officially broken something that's going to be expensive to repair. They weren't over when guy and girl were caught in the empty baptistry together. They weren't over when guy and girl disappeared and were the last ones to be found. They weren't over when there was a alleged immaculate conception. Like, they were over when
Yep.
we broke something.
And isn't that like church? We really care about when things go wrong if something breaks. But
Yeah, I mean, whatever. We don't really care about you as a person. I mean, we do, because without you, there'd be no tithe.
yeah.
Just don't break stuff. Just don't break stuff.
Yeah. I think at Life Church I feel like the parents want to lock in more than we do because they're like, oh, my kid gets to get out of the house. And they're doing it in an environment like church. What could go wrong at church? My sweet little kid has never done anything wrong before. And yes, we don't want the parenting responsibility for the night. So can you guys please do a lock-in for sweet little Johnny? He would love to do it. And he's not going to do anything. He just likes Doritos and video games. And we know how that goes.
Yeah. Back to the question. I don't think
What was the question? I'm just kidding.
I don't think that it was so much a, if they're there, then that's okay for my kid. I think that what I encountered a little bit more often was your mistakes are a little bit bigger and more public than everybody else's.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to be talking about them. We're going to be letting you know that we saw them, and we're going to be mentioning them on into the future. This is a thing for discussion now because, expectations were different. Expectations were higher. And so, little things that was like, we're going to go talk to your dad right now, or we're going to go discuss this right now, or there's going to be a meeting called in the pastor's office about how I was spoken to by your kid, or whatever. And some of that was merited. I mean, let's be honest. Some of it I totally deserved, but a lot of it had to do with, I can't parent my own kid well, so I'm going to try and parent this other one, and so mistakes seemed a little bit bigger. There was less room to fail and a whole lot more pressure to actually act a different way in the church building when other people were around, or even out in public, because you didn't know when you're going to run into a church person at a restaurant or a store. So there was a lot of don't forget who you are.
Oh yeah. That needs to be my tattoo. I don't have any tattoos, but if I did, so my story is probably a little different because my parents became pastors in the middle of 4th grade going into 5th grade. I was already 11 years old when this was happening. So I didn't have this childhood of necessarily that. I was already a preteen going into my teenage years when this was. So a lot of things were kind of already established by then in terms of my personality. Even my identity was even a little different because I was not a pastor's kid till later. Some of you guys are, out of the womb, boom, you're ready to go. My daughter Haven's she knows nothing other than probably daddy, church, home, and Sienna for you. I didn't have that. So I think it's a little different for me because some of those expectations were already there. And I think by 11, you kind of already know if like your kid's going to be a good kid or not, or at least you can tell some trends by then. So I think it wasn't as big of
Yeah.
a deal for that. But for you, do you remember any expectations that were put on you from a young age? And well, maybe let's talk about when you were a teenager. So let's talk to the 13 to 18-year-old right now that's listening. What are some expectations that you had from in that middle school, high school area? Maybe they were fair expectations. And let's be clear, listener, just because there's expectations of you, that doesn't mean anything's bad. That just means like,
Right.
don't be a victim to be like, oh, my parent told me to high. That's probably good that they probably held you to a high standard. In fact, if you're not a pastor's kid and you're just a kid, hopefully your parents are holding you to a high standard as well and for expectations. But what were some of those like maybe even unspoken expectations that you had?
I remember one very clearly, probably my freshman or sophomore year of high school, when we had to decide if we were going to like fully go all in the practice what we preach sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because, in my freshman year, that was around the time that public schools started having, sports games on Wednesday nights and
Mm-hmm.
sometimes tournaments on Sundays. And, that was kind of non-existing as far as I understand back in the 70s and 80s. Get to the 90s and early 2000s and culture secularizing a bit more. And so it was preached from our pulpit on the regular, you don't miss church for baseball. You don't miss church for basketball. You don't miss church for anything. And we went to the extreme, right? Because we're not just talking about Sunday morning. We're talking about you don't miss Sunday night. You don't miss Wednesday night. You don't miss the revival meetings. You don't miss anything. If we've got it scheduled, you better be in your seat. Otherwise, you're in sin,
And early.
And yeah, you better be early, praise God, or it's going to be the Robin Williams scene of the choir being like, you're late, you're late, you're late.
You're late.
And, or at least that's what we wanted to do. And so I remember that said Bible quiz team that I was on. And, I know a lot of people are going to be like, John, you're so cool. But my nationally award-winning Christian ensemble that I was singing in was also getting ready to go to national competition. And the Bible quiz competition and the choir competition coincided with a revival meeting that our church had scheduled. So they're like, you can't go. And I said, well, my team is counting on me. Musical group that I sing is counting on me. Like, this is going to be, it's going to be bad if I don't go. And I'm going to sing about Jesus and to answer questions about Jesus. I don't understand. And they're like, no, you don't miss, you don't miss anything. You don't miss anything, because if we let you miss, then all of the parents that we have shunned for letting their kids miss or them missing themselves are going to believe that we're hypocrites. And it was like,
I can't have
and
that.
the more I rationalized and the more I reasoned with them, I'm like, this is insane. I think that even my grandfather began to like understand, like, you're right. This is insane. Even the guest preacher, who was his best friend, looked at my grandfather and was like, this is dumb. Do not do this to him. This is insane. But he was so committed to what was probably true. Other people are going to, like, they expect him to be there because this is what I've preached. And I want to also say, to the counterbalance, there are some things that are preached and expected of you that ought to be preached and expected of you. Like, as a PK, when you're like,
Oh, yeah.
people are watching me, like, you should be free to be a kid and do the fun things that kids do. But you're not free to sin like all of your buddies do.
Yeah.
There are some things that like are just supposed to be this way. And eventually, even though I know like eyes are rolling right now as we say it, like mine would have rolled when I was 16, eventually you're going to get to a point where you're going to be like, dang, I'm glad I missed out on that. I'm so glad I was in church when everybody else was over here in sin.
I feel that. I'm so glad I can look back on 32 now. I'm glad, we'll call it 15 years ago when I'm in high school, that I don't have this baggage that I have to carry of this, that, or the other. So one of the things that's funny about me is I felt bad for not having this quote unquote like testimony. Bad kid gone good and now is a pastor and now everything's great. At first I was like, man, like I wish I'd done something like crazy. I wish I'd had like the,
I wish I had
like
a testimony.
I wish I had testimony. But I think the best testimony you can have is just consistency in your life. And the fact that every day, small decisions lead to now I'm in my 30s and the things that, I don't have to have this baggage or an addiction to something to where
Yes.
if it started in high school, or am I always battling this underlying addiction? Thank God, no. Like my life, I just was not exposed to drugs at that age, alcohol, pornography. Like those just were not things that were ever exposed to me. And I thank God my parents
Yep.
didn't allow me to be in those positions to be in. I'm glad I'm not 32 years old struggling with things like pornography,
Yep.
or drugs or drinking too much or whatever that is. Thank God I can sit here and say, man, doesn't have to be my life.
Yes.
And if those are like shock words to you for saying that, like that's life. Like you're getting exposed to that stuff. But thank God you have parents that are hopefully able to keep you like living to a standard that's just better and telling you like that's just not what you want. And I know right now you're just like, oh, but everyone else is doing it. I'll worry about that when I'm in my 30s.
Mm,
You would much rather not
can't
worry
wait.
about it in your 30s. You really don't want to. And I know you're probably eye rolling us right now and going, these boomers over here, what do they know? But we know a thing or two. Also, if you're a parent listening to this as well, so zeroing in on the parent here, if you're a parent listening to this, you don't have to be your child's best friend. You can tell them no. You can take their phones away. You can put guards up on what they see and what they don't see. And there's probably workarounds to it but everything in your power to do, because holiness is so much more important than coolness.
Yes.
And you want to raise holy kids. You want to raise kids that are for the kingdom, for Jesus. And also, I mean, like, I think on the other side of this now, I can sit here and say this. I'm glad my parents cared about how people viewed them in the church, because I see it on the other side now going, oh yes, I'm glad I wasn't a screw up, because there's always going to be this underlying, well, I hear you preaching this good message, but your kids are off over here doing X,
Right.
Y, and Z. I don't think when I was in high school, middle school, I gave a rip about that. But be on the other side, I'm sure glad that I was, because, I mean, I wanna make my parents proud just like any of us would,
Yeah.
and so I'm glad I don't have that testimony of that, but I do have a testimony of consistency and just maybe not doing always the right thing, but not doing the wrong thing either.
Yes. And that's why this podcast as a whole exists, because there are some things that are realities that a lot of people want to bemoan and boohoo and cry about. Well, being a PK means living in a glass house. And to that I say, correct. And that's not going away. And it's not even necessarily a bad thing as much as it does enhance the fact that people see. But people see everyone. And so we don't want, as parents, to demand that our kids live, because we are both parenting PKs now. We don't want to demand that our kids live a certain way because we live in a glass house. We want to say we live in a glass house, and because we do, we want to accurately reflect what God expects for those who are a part of his house. So yeah, if you're a PK, you're like, what does this have to do with mental health? Well, it boils down to we're understanding our spiritual life is expected to be strong by people who don't have a strong spiritual life. And our behavior is expected to be spotless by people who are not parenting their kids well, who don't have spotless behavior. And our faith is expected to be unwavering. We're supposed to be first one to the altar at church camp if we're not leading worship and a group at church camp. Like, you're expected to be all of those things. And you will always be expected to be those things by nature of the fact that your family is leading in a spiritual environment. Here's what it leads us to, and that is that not very many people ever really stop and ask if your heart is healthy.
Mhm.
And I will never forget sitting in the office of a traveling evangelist who I just loved. His name was Matt Friend, and he was my friend. And
Great name.
he sat down in an office at our church and was just spending some time with me intentionally. And he looked over at me and he said, John, how's your heart? And I was a senior in high school at the time, and no one had ever asked me anything like that.
Hmm.
How's your heart? I didn't know how to answer it. Like, how is your heart? And I'm like, I'm saved. He's
Easy.
like, yeah, but cool. He's like, but can I just ask a deeper question? Are there some things that you're struggling with that you feel like you can't be honest with anybody else that you're actually struggling with? How's your heart?
Yeah.
And I had never cried in an office before that day. when I got real open, honest, and honest with someone who he knew who my family was. He knew what that represented. And that's why he intentionally sat down with me and said, hey, this is between me and you. He showed me a little, special attention, which made, a big difference. He's like, hey, I want to talk to you. How's your heart? And it just got me thinking, like, Eli, did you ever feel like there were things that you were struggling with that you couldn't be open and honest with anybody about?
Yes, absolutely. Because I feel like if I went to my youth pastor, well, they work for my parents. If I went to somebody outside, it's like, well, why is Eli going to talking to somebody outside? He can't talk to anybody in the church. Which brings me back to option one. If I talk to anybody in the church, they're in church. Which then goes, well, then who do I talk to? Myself? Okay. There was no Chat GPT AI to go, here's how I'm feeling today.
Yep.
Well, I say that, and I bet you 70% of our listeners, statistics say that, have conversations with an AI bot about how they're feeling, where they go to Google. So, my biggest probably regret's not the right word. Being in ministry on this side now, though, I wish I had probably gone to people who were my youth pastors more or my group leaders more for the reason of just having an outlet,
Yes.
and not even like I didn't have any of these like massive struggles going on, and I'll say this, my parents were great at having an open dialogue. It wasn't like I couldn't go to them at all. But sometimes you're just like, man, this, just need to go to somebody on the outside, And
Yeah.
so I probably didn't. And I think probably to this day, I probably still have a struggle of releasing emotions in that way. Probably not like as, again, it's nothing that's like a big deal by any means, but I wish I had had the confidence to say, "Oh, I do have a youth pastor that I can go and talk to about this. I do have a small group leader that I can talk to about this."
Yeah.
So, yeah, I would say I probably held on to things longer than I should have. But the back end of it is that whenever I was at my end, it would be a blow up
Yeah.
because I didn't address whatever that was, or I didn't talk about this when I probably could have. And it's easy for us to sit here and preach, oh, yeah, if you have something going on, you go talk to people in your church. And to a degree, that makes sense. So we're talking to the pastor's kid here. The people on the outside aren't your parents. So they're not going to their parents to talk about this or their parents' staff members going to this. The people on the outside are going because that truly is their outside. They don't have a direct line of relationship with them. So it is
Right.
a little easier and it's easier to preach. Just go talk to your pastor about this, do this. So you do feel like you kind of have to, I feel like hide is not the right word, but maybe put on more of a happy face than probably sometimes I was actually feeling. Just because, it was easier to do that than to, have the potential that your parents knew something was going wrong. Nothing crazy, but those little things like that in mental health. Okay, it's a little brick here, and then over here's another little brick of something else. It's another little thing, and then you add it up, and you're like, man, why is my heart hardened towards this?
Yes.
Well, it's because I had this going on, didn't ever get rid of it, and then I had these expectations on me over here that I didn't realize. Got it, and now I have to be at church every day. Got it, and so it's just these tiny little bricks that build up. Some of you guys, one of those bricks may be huge for you, a huge stumbling block. Some of you guys, it's just little tiny gnats. And then you're like, why is everything collapsing? Well, it's just
Yeah.
because one of the foundation pieces was pulled from that brick and everything comes crumbling down.
And I think most PKs feel like they have to hide their struggles so that people don't judge their family. Like, I don't want people to think some kind of way about my parents if I confess this. So, to your point, Eli, there's a little bit of like, ooh, if I talk to them, they work for my parents. If I talk to them, they might use this as ammo against my parents because sometimes the thing you need to talk about is your parents. And I really, when you reached out to me and you're like, hey, our episode should be on mental health.
Mhm.
I really sat down. I mean, I opened an old journal from when I was in high school as a PK and just read through some of the things that I was going through. And looking back on that with more spiritual maturity and context, there are two things that I wish I would have done. And I want to offer them as advice to my friend that's listening. Number one is I wish I would have known about something like Standing Stone, where I could talk to a professional counselor or therapist for free. And that's because you're a PK. There are perks to being a pastor's kid, and one of them is you can go to Standing Stone's website, fill out the form, and they will connect you either via Zoom, phone call, or in person, depending on your city,
Yep.
with a professional therapist or counselor that will meet with you forever for free because they care about shepherding shepherds. I wish I would have known about something more professional because in the environment that I grew up in, and I know there's a lot of PKs still in a religious space that looks down on therapy and looks down on counseling. You just need to pray more. You just need to
Yeah.
repent and read your Bible.
Yeah.
And Eli, why do people say crap like that? Maybe because sometimes that's actually true. People are trying to get therapy for something they need to get, repent for. But the reality is there are difficult things that everyone has to navigate, especially people who are in proximity to spiritual leadership, that it'd be good to have a sounding board for who can speak to you at a professional level. But secondly is, as I thought through that Matt Friend moment, it would have been good to have had another pastor. And I think I got this later in high school. I don't think I realized that I had it till later, but I had it. Another pastor that you can talk to who wants nothing from you, that's, is not in competition with, your mom or dad. I think for me, his name was George Griffiths, and he was a pastor. I got to talk to him about anything and know that he never would look at my family differently based on what I told him, and it would never leave. I think he proved to me that, he was never, ever going to share anything that I shared with him.
That's so
And
good.
if there's a pastor, because as a PK, your dad's brought in somebody to be a guest speaker that you hit it off with. If there's a pastor that you can be honest with and that will be honest with you, even if your parents are not perfect, you don't have to worry, because they're not. You don't have to worry about, them being like, oh, I'm going to take this to the board, of the church, or I'm going to blast them on social media. I think, Eli, you and I have got to be this for hundreds of PKs at this point. I think of one extremely famous pastor who every single one of his kids have had intense private conversations with me, sharing about here's what I'm dealing with, because they know that even when I, take their side over his, that it's never going to go live on social media. And they also know that whenever he's right and they're wrong, I'm going to tell them, suck it up. Let's work through this.
And also some of those kids of said famous people are listeners of this. And they're telling us, and they're texting us on the side going, oh man, I wish I'd known this 5-10 years ago.
Yes.
Because my dad is on TV or social media or has 20,000 people in his church. And people that if we were to say their name, you would be like, oh yeah. Or you've at least heard them referenced before, you'd know. And we're thankful for those kids or, of those pastors going, man, this is exactly what we need. And 10 years ago, when John and I began even having conversations because of being pastors' kids completely before this podcast was even a reality, why did we call each other? Because we were going through these things. We became that for each other. And one of the things that this Pastors Kid podcast wants to do is create a group and a community to which you can connect with other PKs with. And maybe you're following each other on Instagram or whatever it is, and you have a sounding board. It's also good to have a peer-to-peer, hey, this is what's going on as well, because they're like, oh yeah, I feel this way too. And I live 12 hours away. And that was John and I's story. We met 10, 12 years ago, 13 years ago. But 10 years ago, we started having these calls with each other man, what are we doing? How are you doing? And it really changed.
I forget is that Eli and I met through Twitter because back in, how many years has it been now? It's over 10.
We just had our 13-year Facebook friendship anniversary.
Okay. So between 13 and 15 years ago at this point, which is crazy to me, PK Twitter accounts were a big deal, and they were posting about their parents.
Y'all don't know what Twitter was like. 12 years ago, Twitter was a whole
Twitter
different
was
thing.
Amazing. It was awesome, and it was hilarious, but it was also oh my goodness, there's a few of them that we figured out who they were. They got a little too specific about what their parents were doing behind the scenes, and we're we know who you are. And Eli and I, we didn't even know each other, started interacting with these accounts and
we were not
these
anonymous.
People. We were not anonymous, by the way. Have not had an anonymous account.
We put all of our shame on Twitter.
Yeah, exactly. And so we just started reaching out to these hashtag PKs, and we're like, hey, if you ever need to vent, cry, or cuss, you can always call us. And one day, I think I saw Eli respond with some genuine advice. I think you responded to someone on a PK thing, was like, yeah, I went through this too, but here's how I came out on the other side. And I think I sent you a DM and was like, bro, we need to be friends. And it was all like, can we get on the phone and chat about this? Cause I'm still dealing with the aftermath of all of this, and it was amazing. And I think what we discovered quickly is that the pressure of being a PK leads to some things, and it naturally leads to anxiety. It leads to burnout. It leads to emotional exhaustion. Again, there are a lot of great places where it can lead, but if you're not careful, if you don't guard yourself, those are 3 places that you can go really quickly. And so we jotted down some ways to know that you're there, some questions to ask to determine, am I in a healthy place or am I in an emotionally unhealthy headspace? And I think the first one that I wrote down is, identity confusion. Am I loved for me or am I loved for who my parents are? And sit with that. And if you say, I think I'm loved for who my parents are, ask why that is and really dig deep into it. Eli, what did you come up with?
I think for me, I always was like, if I screw this up, am I burning the church down? And
Yeah.
I think the fear of public ministry failure was stronger than my obedience towards God. That's kind of where I lived. And not because it's necessarily
just not enough motivation. It's not enough motivation to keep living right.
It's not. And I think that was a pressure maybe I put on myself, or maybe it's not even that. I think it was the little tiny passing comments from other people that did it. It was never really my parents necessarily. Of course they were like, if you do this, it is gonna make us look terrible. But it was not like a pressure thing. But for me, it was more like the other people going, oh, you can't do that. You can't do that. Well, you can't go here. You're the pastor's kid. How many of you guys listening right now have been told, he's the pastor's kid, you shouldn't be doing that? Okay, it's funny for 5 seconds, and then it's not funny for that. Almost like now, John, maybe you can relate to this. I don't mean to get off here, but whenever you get married, people automatically, they start asking, oh, when are you going to have a baby? And then you have one, it's like, when are you going to have number 2? Okay, it's like one time they say it, all right, cool, whatever. But everyone starts asking that because they don't know what else to say. And I think sometimes other people in a church don't know what to say to you sometimes. They're just trying to make conversation and they're just trying to relate to you somehow, even though they can't. And so I think on the other side, I can mature and go, they weren't actually putting this pressure necessarily on me. They just didn't know how else to relate to me.
Yes.
And they thought it was funny, but they don't realize that 200 other people have said the exact same thing before.
Maybe on our merch store, we should have a t-shirt that just says, I've already heard your jokes. Don't try it, because the people who need to hear that statement are not listening to these episodes, and rightly so. But here's how real that got for me. I don't know if I've ever shared this before, but when I was in 3rd grade, there was this, in the height of Nickelodeon and One Saturday Morning cartoons, there was a toy that came out and it was on every commercial. It was called a Yak Back. And it was this little handheld thing that had 2 buttons on it, record and play. And so you clicked record and you could record 60 seconds of something, and then you could push play and play it back. And that's all that it did. But the commercial made it look like it was the most awesome toy that everyone needed. And so we all had to have one. And they were like, $15, but that was very expensive,
Yep.
And I remember I saved enough money, and my aunt took me to go buy this Yak Back. And I knew what I wanted to use it for, because people would ask me the same dumb questions on Sunday every week as a kid. And so I don't remember exactly what I recorded into it, but I timed it so I could get all the words out quickly. Hi, my name is John Groves. Yes, I'm Pastor Larry's grandson. Yes, I'm 9 years old. Yes, I play the piano. Yes, and I remember on one particular Sunday, I got my Yak Back, and the first person that was like, hey, and I just clicked play on it and just stood there and held it. And my grandfather saw it, and it was quickly taken away from me. I think I didn't get my Yak Back for 5 weeks or something. But it was this frustration with, why is everybody asking me this? And why they got to be asking me dumb questions? And really it's that people don't know how to chat. They just don't. And they're not talking to other kids in the church, by the way. They feel like they can talk to you because PKs are typically a little bit more socially advanced, because we have to spend our lives around adults. We've had to go through things in life that no one else ever will. I was I attended more funerals by the time I was a senior in high school than most people would attend in 15 lifetimes.
Yeah.
I'd already been in like 40 some weddings, like I had been in church almost every day of my life. And so you have to develop conversational skills and
Mhm.
leadership skills that other people don't, which I think is what caused me to struggle with. My biggest thing was performance Christianity.
Yeah.
Like that was like, I want
For
every PK
sure.
to stop and ask, like, am I living for God or am I performing when I do this? Because
For sure. God, that would if there
yes,
was I have now 2 tattoos that I've mentioned, that I'm gonna get. One was gonna be I don't even remember what it was anymore, but this one right here, if I had this, it was I used to be a performer Christian. And not because I didn't love God, like, right, John? I mean, you loved God,
yeah,
but at the same time, you're like, "I gotta have the right Bible verse today," or,
yes,
I gotta say the right thing at church, and I gotta have the smile
yes.
on. And it wasn't I think fake it till you make it is probably how it was. I love Jesus. I didn't love him as much as my public persona probably would have liked for you to think about it. But yeah, do you feel that way? How now on the other side, do you think that someone who is younger and in this, how do you think they can overcome that? Because it's real. And I think even adults do this too. It's not just a kid thing.
Yeah, we're going to give you some Bible verses when we close that are the foundation for everything we've discussed. But let me say this to you, and you need to hear it clearly and you need to know it deeply. Ministry is not your identity. Ministry is not your identity. Christ is. And until you are settled in being a child of God, you will be unsettled by all the implications of being a child of the pastor. And I am convinced that the massive deconstruction movement in the lives of preachers' kids. Yes, I know there are hypocritical pastors. I was raised by some. Yes, there are ridiculous expectations. Eli, you and I have both encountered probably all of them individually, if not combined.
Together.
I'm convinced that PKs don't lose their faith so much as they just get tired of pretending.
Yep.
They just get so don't pretend. Don't fake it till you make it. Don't find your identity in the ministry that you do or the family to which you belong. Get real comfortable with being a child of God, and in the process, in the journey of sanctification that he's called you to individually. And yeah, life is going to be so much more fulfilling.
Yep. This reminds me of I was reading recently Matthew 6:1, and it says this. It says, I'm just going to read it to you. Be careful not to practice your righteousness in front of others to be seen by them. If you do, you will have no reward from your Father in heaven. And my question to you is this, and you've probably never thought about your spiritual life through this lens, but is your walk with God, is the reward, so the back half of that verse is, you'll have no reward from your Father in heaven. Is the
Mm.
reward for you the praise from people in church or being in his presence every day? And I think a lot of times we would go, I need to get this right because it's going to be praise from other people in the church and not because we're actually in his presence every day. So if the reward is presence, then you're on the right track.
Yes.
But if the reward is praise from others, you're always going to be striving in performance Christianity.
Yes.
These are Jesus's words. I mean, this is in red letters. And, I just think that it's so easy to get caught up in doing right, looking right, feeling right, laughing right, smiling right, having your hair right, making sure your teeth are brushed right, making sure your outfit's right, that we forget that this whole thing is about me and Jesus.
Yes.
And out of the overflow of that should come, whatever may be. And so I think for John and I, we have very different upbringings in very different churches. John and I's churches are different. Like what we do is different. And I think that's great because we can relate to people on both sides of the spectrum. But at the same time, the struggles are so similar as well. And so you may be able to think, man, my life would look better if my parents had this and they had a little bit more money and they had a bigger church and I had more friends. And yet John and I both are, FaceTiming with some of these kids going, it looks great on the outside, but on the inside, we're struggling here and we don't know what else to do sometimes. And we've been on those calls and we're sitting there like, now we're not shocked when the reward was praise, applause, and friendships and likes and clicks and not presence and prayer. Then it's It's a house built on cards, and eventually it'll
Yes.
crumble.
Sometimes the church unintentionally teaches PKs that their life is to be an example of perfection, but the Bible actually gives us something so much better than perfection right now, and it's grace. And Paul was always saying, I glory in my weakness because his strength is made perfect in my weakness. Paul was real quick to say, I struggle. He's like, God's power shows up most in the places where I am broken. Jesus said, come to me, all you that labor and are heavy laden, I will give you rest. And I think that those are principles that most PKs know off the top. Here's one that has ministered deeply to me in my reflections, not only as a pastor, but also as a PK. And it's Psalm 103, verse 14. For he knows our frame, and he remembers that we are dust. PK, God has never expected perfection from you. And when you sin, here's what he remembers. They're dust.
Boom.
And when you are struggling and you come to him in prayer and you're like, God, I'm struggling with this. You know what he knows? He knows exactly how fragile you are. He knows your frame and he remembers. He's always remembering that you are dust. And so in the subject of mental health today, Eli and I are going to ask a couple of questions and answer a couple of them so that you can hear how we have processed it in navigating this and, working through it. And so, Eli, what helped you break free from the pressure of being perfect?
I think, honestly, the fact that I wasn't perfect and that I was messing things up and nothing was crumbling around me. I messed up and nothing collapsed in the church. My parents didn't. They didn't look bad. I think my parents gave me a safe space to mess up. I believe my dad said this, or he said something along the lines of this is, I'll be your call if you're going to jail, I'll be your first call, but just know that'll be your last call you make for a very long time. You're still going to get in trouble, but I want to be your first call in those situations where you do get in trouble, or if you do get in trouble. But just know that at the same time, it's going to be your last call. In other words, meaning you're not going to have freedoms because, this happened.
Yeah.
But I do want to be a father that loves you and that gives you grace and that is there for you when things are hard. And him communicating those things to me almost was like, okay, I can breathe here for a second. But not all of you guys have that. Not all of you guys have that in your corner. So what I would say is this. Your parents' church isn't going to collapse because you had a bad attitude. Your parents' church isn't going to collapse because you were rude to somebody. If the church is built on your attitude and your behavior, then the church wasn't built on the right things anyways.
Right. And some of you are feeling the pressure of the fact that your parents have told you that it's going to have widespread ripple effect if you mess up or embarrass them or screw up. And I just want you to know it's not. And like Eli said, if it does, good. Your parents don't need to be in ministry. I know what helped me begin my break-free journey, and I remember it like it was yesterday. I may have shared this on the podcast before, but the guy that I mentioned already, George Griffiths, I was 16 and working at summer camp, but still very much obeying all of the PK rules. Make sure you wear the dress clothes, make sure you wear your tie, make sure you and I know some of you are like, what? But that was the denomination. That was the thing. And, make sure the shoes are shined. And I'm not even joking. It was a lot. And at this one particular day, there was this giant water balloon fight happening, mud slinging. It had just been a torrential, horrible weather week, and we were just going to take advantage of it and make it fun. And that was not my kind of thing. One, because we never acted like that because people are watching, So I was sitting, in the porch area with all of the pastors discussing pastorly things. And George Griffiths comes up and he grabs me and he goes, "Hey, you're going to go be in the water balloon fight." And I was like, "No, I'm not." And he goes, "Yeah, I'm giving you permission to go be in the water balloon fight." And I was like, "I don't want your permission. I don't want to be in it." And he's like, "Hey," and he grabbed my shoulders in a very fatherly way. And he looked me in the eye and he said, "It's okay to not be an old man. It is okay to not be a pastor. It is okay for you to be whoever God wants you to be. And if it's none of those things, that will be all right." Now, I knew I was going to be a pastor. I knew all those things. God had already made that call clear in my life. What he was communicating was, you don't have to be somebody that you're not for people that don't really care. And for the first time in my teenage life, I had some teenage fun with this other pastor. And for me, that was significant because the moment after that, my hairstyle changed from mimicking all of the same hairstyle that all the preachers had to a normal hairstyle that a teenager had. My style changed from being known as the dude with the starched shirts at school to being the dude who dressed like everybody else. My humor changed. Like everything about me changed in that one moment when I was given permission to be me. And I can't reach through your phone right now and put my hands on your shoulders like I wish that I could. But I want to say to you, clear as day, it is okay for you to be you. It's okay. It's exactly what God wants from you. And so with that in mind, I think it would be appropriate for us to close the episode by just mentioning some of the things as parents of PKs and as PKs ourselves that we believe the church could do, both our pastor parents and church as a whole, to better care for PKs. What would be your top items on the list, Eli?
Permission to fail, probably. And also, trying to word this right, I would say probably just understanding that it's okay to be a kid. And just if you can internalize that. But the church out there, if you're a parent listening, do you remember being a kid? I think sometimes parents don't remember what it was like to be a kid. Like, genuinely, I think they're just like, I forgot exactly what it was like to be a kid. Just, if you're a parent out there, just know your kid wants to be able to grow up. And they don't want all their messes to be told in their staff meetings and on social media now or whatever it is. That's just, I don't know. So I think just remember what it was like to be a kid yourself and put your kid in your shoes with the, magnifying glass that they have on them.
I think I would say stop treating them like staff members. They shouldn't be expected to run sound or lead worship or work or even be present at every event just because of their last name. I really like the idea of protecting their privacy. One of our previous episodes, I think it was Carson or I can't remember who it was that talked about that their dad made a deal that if he accidentally used it as an illustration without their permission, he had to pay him $50. You remember that?
I do.
That stuck with
permission.
me.
It was like a jar they had.
Yeah.
If that was you listening to this, tell us.
Yes. And, make church fun. There are some things that you are going to have to do that you shouldn't necessarily be expected to do, but let them feel like that's a blessing, which means don't be like, well, if we did that for you, we'd have to do that for everyone. No, you freaking don't. You can do things for the PKs, pastor, okay, and church leaders. You can do things for the PKs that you don't do for everyone else. So PK, if that's true for you, you don't have to tell everybody else that it's happening, but there can be some perks. There could be some surprise appreciation. There's one church that we saw on Instagram has a pastor's kids snack cabinet hidden away in the hallway because they know that a lot of their PKs are going to be there for 4 different services. And so they have made what other people would think of as a drudgery, like a fun thing. Like, let your PK do some things that other people don't get to do. And then, encourage them in the things that they do well. But I think the biggest thing for me that I want to do for my daughter is to give them safe adults who aren't their parents, to disciple them or mentor them who they know they can talk to and they're not going to be like reporting back. Like my daughter right now, she's fixing to be 5 years old. But there is a couple that, and they're like the only couple really, but there's a couple that she can talk to anytime she wants. They pastor a church in Tennessee. Shout out to the Swains if they're listening to this episode. And the Swains actually, we met them because of this PK podcast, which was amazing. And my daughter can stay at their house anytime. My daughter can call them on the phone anytime. My daughter can say anything she wants to them because I know the advice they're going to give her is going to be solid and they don't have to tell me. And from now till Jesus comes, they don't have to tell me anything that she says, and she'll know it. Like, they are safe people to discuss, and she can know that there's not going to be repercussions for admitting her struggles to them. I know they're going to help her, and they're going to love her the way that we would want her to be loved.
I think that this could be healing for people. I think this could be eye-opening even for parents maybe who don't
Yeah.
understand, especially first generation pastors. Maybe if their parents weren't pastors, where they didn't grow up in this, and they can see kind of what it was like now to be a pastor's kid. For those of you who have had your parents, your grandparents have been pastors, your great-grandparents have been pastors, or maybe another family member to where it's been common to be a pastor's kid, your parents may understand, but they also may forget what it was like. And so hopefully this brings healing to you. Again, performance Christianity, you don't have to perform for anybody. You just don't. Parents listening, give your kids some perks for crying out loud. Man, let them drink the grape juice communion and eat all the little wafer breads. They're not going to hell for that. They're not. They're just getting their carbs in for the day. And God bless Welch's Grape Juice for sponsoring this. They need to be drinking that Welch's Grape Juice because you don't do
Come
real
on.
wine for your communion. And then also, it's okay, kid, to fail. It's okay to, and I'm not saying fail like, we're not saying you're doing anything illegal or immoral, but you're a kid. Okay, you're a teenager. If you think perfection is going to get you into heaven or get you into good graces with the people in your church, well, one, your church is built on a house of cards then. If everything relies on you being perfect, oh, buddy, then it's not, then just know. But also just know, man, we want you to be able to laugh, cry, everything. And that's why we're here, to create a community of pastors' kids who can support each other when things are hard. You can come to us. If you were to see our messages and DMs after these podcasts of people just like you, and you may be scared to even type it out. I wonder what Eli and John are going to think about me, or my parent is this. You may know who my parent is, but here's how I'm feeling. This is not gossip that we're doing. Like, we're not having gossip culture, but also at the same time, you're going through real life things that maybe you can't talk to someone else about. One, it's okay to come to us as well. We're not necessarily your pastors, and we're not counselors, but we're in your corner. We love you, and we want to see you win. We want to see you win. We're all about this. And that's why 10 years ago, we started these phone calls with each other, because we needed somebody. And so if that's you and you see this on social media or you're listening to this, man, share it with someone else that you know who's a pastor's kid. Find other pastors' kids in your community. I'm sure your parents have other pastors' friends in the community. Man, get around them as well. Find out who their kids are. And maybe there's age differences. I don't know what your context is like. So I don't want to, generalize everything, but don't go through this thing alone. Do not do it. Just that simple. Don't.